Hi everyone, Christina Werner here with another video for AssignmentsToStamp.com. Today I'm using the July 2021 card kit, which comes with this awesome mesh bag. All of the contents of the kit fit inside, but for today's cards, I'm going to be focusing on the stamp set, which is called Garden Greetings. I'm going to be creating 6 different cards using this stamp set. And these worked up really easily, especially because I used this assorted pack of cardstock with tons of different colors from Simon. So these are all cut to 4¼ by 5½, or an A2 card front. And I picked out 6 different colors of cardstock to work with. And I'm going to be creating some very simple card designs using these. So for the first 3 cards, I'm going to be using the wreath image from the stamp set. I'm going to be stamping it in the same position for all 3 cards. So to make my life a little bit easier when it comes to these cards, I'm going to mount it on the door of my MISTI stamp positioning tool and leave it there until all 3 cards have the wreath on it. I'm prepping the cardstock with an anti-static powder tool because I'm going to be embossing on all 6 of these cards. So this is going to be my best friend right before I stamp all of these images. Speaking of stamping, I'm using some Versamark ink, which is a great embossing ink. So I'll ink that up and turn the door of my MISTI over and stamp that down. So I'm going to be using gilded embossing powder from Bertus Monroe for most of these cards. Just on one, I will be using a white embossing powder, but I'm just applying that directly onto my stamping. And then I'll use a heat tool to heat set this until it's smooth and melted. There's going to be a lot of embossing for all of these cards. So, but it does go quickly. I think I finished all 6 of these in under an hour. So I'll heat set this until everything is smooth. You can see how beautiful that gold is against this pale purple color. I moved on to a pale pink, did the same thing, and then onto a piece of gray cardstock where I switched to alabaster embossing powder. It's a white embossing powder. I then stamped the greetings from the stamp set in the interior of each of these wreaths. I put Get Well on the purple one, Hugs on this pale pink, and then I also added some hearts. There are some very small individual stamps that are hearts in the stamp set, and I used those to fill in some of the gaps. And I also took the smallest heart and just added it on the outside of the wreath shape as well. This just gives it a little bit more of a filled out appearance, and I kind of liked the idea of having these hearts when the greeting is hugs. I added some of that gold embossing powder on all of the hearts and then heat set that so that it was smooth and melted. For my gray card, I used the greeting that says thank you, and that was a really simple process. I just stamped it and heat embossed it with that white embossing powder. Okay, on to some other designs that don't use the wreath shape. I'm using this beautiful Audrey blue color of cardstock, and I'm using sort of this kind of it's a spray of these leaves for this one, and I wanted it to create kind of a circular shape, so I needed to stamp that spray upside down, just rotated, and I wanted it to be in the perfect position, but I didn't want to run the risk of any residual ink being on the stamp still when I was kind of moving it around and getting it in the right position. So I put the clear packaging from the stamp set on top just to protect the cardstock, and I could also kind of move it around and get it in the right spot. And then I was able to position that spray of leaves in the perfect spot. So you can do a similar effect using a grid transparency sheet from Simon. I'll try to remember to link that down below. But if you're in a pinch and you don't have that, I couldn't find mine in this case, you can use your stamp packaging or anything that's clear that stamp will stick to. So I applied my gold embossing powder, and then I'm going to put my greeting right in the center area. And the greeting I chose for this card is Happy Birthday. So I stamped that in Versamark ink apply the embossing powder, and then heat set that. So that's all the stamping for my 4th card. Moving on to my 5th card, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I've moved my cardstock to the top left corner of my MISTI. I've positioned all of my stamps. There's this long kind of border stamp in the stamp set. So it's being stamped running off the bottom edge of the card design. And then I've got 2 greeting stamps off to the side. I prepped that with an anti-static powder tool and then stamped all 3 stamp images using Versamark ink and applied some gilded embossing powder, once again from Brutus Monroe, and then heat set that until it was smooth and melted. This is a really different design in comparison to the other ones, which are have a definite circular or radiant, radiating look. For this 5th card, I did the same thing that I did for one of the previous designs. Actually, this is the 6th card. But now I'm going to stamp and add a bunch of imagery from the stamp set to fill out all of those corners. So I've taken that long border stamp and I put it on an acrylic block. I'm not using my MISTI for this because I'm going to be moving it around quite a bit and it's going to hang off the edge of the card front. So I thought it would just be easier to do this with the traditional stamping block. Stamping a few of these sections at a time before I apply embossing powder. I'm doing that in stages so that I don't accidentally brush off any of the unmelted powder before I can get to it. So I stamped 2 of those kind of along the bottom, and then I'm just using the outer edges of that stamp image to fill in the gaps on the design. Just right along the edge of each one. I'm going to put this one up in the top corner. I just want to fill out all of these areas and nestle the leaves in with each other. I'm using the very top corner of the border stamp for this section. And then for this last empty corner, I'm going to be using an even bigger section of the stamp and have it kind of just go right across that top corner. It is going to leave a little bit of a gap, but there are some smaller stamps included in the stamp set. There's those hearts that I used earlier, and there's also a couple flowers, so you can fill in the gaps where you need to. So I'm taking one of the flowers, a larger flower, and I'm going to stamp that right in that gap. And then I'm going to take a couple of different sizes of hearts. I think this is the medium heart and then the small heart. And I'm just filling in some of those areas that look a little bit empty. So it's going to fill out this whole entire pattern and make it look like one seamless pattern. I think it looks really, really neat. And it's very dramatic in gold embossing powder over this this kind of tealish colored cardstock. Okay, so now I'm going to do a bunch of blending. You could definitely leave these cards as is. I think they look sophisticated and elegant with just the embossing. But I'm going to use some blender brushes from Honeybee and some inks from Simon to really make these dramatic. I'm using soft navy ink on this first one, and I'm going to start right in the center and just get a little bit of that color right behind the words. Now, because I used embossing powder, and once it's melted, it's smooth, it kind of has a slick surface, it will resist any ink that's put on over top. So as I add this ink to the cardstock around it, none of it will be applied to the embossing powder. I've switched to hydrangea ink, and I'm just adding that purple color around the outer edge to get a nice kind of fade out to the original cardstock color. So there's the first design with purple and blue added. Now I'm going to go on to the pink one. I'm going to add Schoolhouse Red ink. This is very dramatic. I think this would be perfect and beautiful with a Valentine's Day card as well. I think pink and red and gold go really well together for Valentine's Day. But in this case, I'm going to add some purple and a little bit of that soft navy and get a really cool effect. Of all of the cards that I'm doing today, this is the one that has the most overall blending because I'm bringing colors in different sections. I brought the red in over the greeting. I'm bringing in this soft navy up at the top just to have a little more drama and darkness in some different sections. And I'm bringing red up into that top corner as well. So it sort of has this kind of, I don't know how to describe it. It's just kind of like this ink blending effect with lots of different colors. This one's super, super simple. I'm using the color Slate, and I'm just going to be inking from the center, similar to that very first Get Well card that I showed you. And just adding that darker color makes it a little bit easier to read even, and more dramatic. For this one, I'm going to be using 3 different colors. I'm using dull pink. I'm blending that in one corner of the wreath, if a wreath does have a corner. And then I'm switching to Hot Mama, and I'm going to bring that into another section, kind of more near the top of the card. And it's going to add more of a red, violet, purple shade over that area of the wreath. And then I'm going to switch to Schoolhouse Red, and I'm going to put this in that last section that doesn't have any color on top. And like I said before, this Schoolhouse Red is very dramatic over pink cardstock. I think it looks absolutely beautiful with the other colors I've chosen. So there's the pink card. I'm going to move on to the Happy Birthday card. I'm going to be using the color Teal from Simon, and I've blended that out from the center. And after I added that, I still wasn't quite sure it was dark enough in the center, so I grabbed Soft Navy, I've used it a few times today, and used that color just in the center over the Happy Birthday area. This is going to intensify that color and help the Happy Birthday stand out even more. Now, I was worried about some of the ink being on top of the embossing powder, which sometimes it happens, so I used a dry paper towel to just wipe off any of that ink off the embossing powder. For this last card, which I think is my favorite, I wanted to add some dark color on the edges of the card. This is going to be almost like a spotlight effect where I keep the center area a lighter shade. So I took Soft Navy all around the outer edge, just adding quite a bit of drama to this. And then I'm using the color Slate, it's the one I used on the gray card, and I'm going to darken up the edges even more, just the edges. I don't want to bring this color all the way into the center. So I'm going around and adding all of that color around the embossing. All right, so these card fronts are basically finished. The only thing I need to do is put them on card bases. So I prepped 6 A2 size cards. So they're scored at 5.5 to create top folding cards. And I made that out of some Neenah Classic Crest Solarite 110-pound cardstock. I then used the new dot runner adhesive from Simon. It's included in the kit for July. And I adhered these card fronts directly onto the card bases. And they held really tight. I was very impressed with this adhesive. So here are my 6 cards for today, all using the stamp set in the July 2021 card kit. All of the supplies, including the card kit, the stamp set, the dot runner adhesive, everything I've used today are included in the supply list down in the video description. And you can click over and get those over at simonsystamp.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in another video very soon.